Welcome back to Man vs. Meeple, the show where we talk about all things board game related. Today we're bringing you a review. This one's for Whistle Stop from Bezier Games. I said at Origins that this was the best game that I played, and I still feel this way after playing it, having the actual review copy in front of us.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you feel even more strongly.
I really like this game a lot. And I'm just going to say why. But there's not much to it. When you look at it, there's not a lot of components. There's not a lot of learning. The rules are a page and a half. But there's so much complexity in the way that you play. There's a lot of depth and strategy in the way that you want to approach the game. It plays 2 to 5 players, and it plays in about an hour and a half to maybe 2 hours. Maybe 2 hours for 5 players.
Yeah, I'll get it right out of the way, too. I like this game as well. I didn't get a chance to play it at Origins, but we played it since we got this copy. And first things first, the game looks beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, I remember seeing the box at Origins, actually even before Origins, when we were like compiling our list, and thought, the graphic design on this thing and the artwork are beautiful. I was hoping the game would back it up, and it seems like it has.
Yeah. It's great also to see that we're seeing more train games that aren't 18X games.
Yeah.
And I said this before, there's nothing wrong with 18X games. A lot of people like those very in-depth train games, but we're seeing kind of an evolution. Railroad Revolution was one of them. Of course, Ticket to Ride, which everyone knows, but approachable train games that look fantastic.
Yeah, and they're not necessarily, basically just proving that a train game doesn't have to be an 18X game.
Yep.
You know, there are train games that, and they have some of the same DNA a little bit. You know, there's stocks in all of them.
Yeah.
You know, you're picking things up and delivering things in some cases. But yeah, I agree with you. I'm not a big fan of the 18X. Those are just too
much.
Too heavy, too much economics going on.
Yeah.
This and things like Railroad Revolution for sure.
First Class, another one.
First Class.
All right, so we have a 5-player game set up. The number of trains that you're going to be using is going to change depending upon the number of players you're playing with. With a 2-player game, you're going to play with 5 trains each. With a 5-player game, you're only going to play with 3 trains each. The board is modular. You have these corner boards that are fit together, and then you're always going to have a row of tiles off to the left, just to the left of your starting trains. You're going to have a middle row. This middle row is going to be comprised of regular train stops. You're going to have 2 locations. You're going to have a coal yard, a trading post, and a whistle factory.
Right.
In no random order. They're just going to be mixed in there in some way, straight down the middle of the board. Over to the right is the destination that all of your trains are trying to get to. These are victory points that you're going to be trying to land on, turn in resources, and then retire that train, all before an X number of rounds occurs. In a 5-player game, you're going to put coal on each of these locations, with coal equaling 2 times the number of players. There's more rounds in a 2-player game than there is in a 5-player game. And you're going to play until all that coal is gone, with each stack going to distribute it evenly to the players at the start of every round.
Right, and just like real trains, coal powers everything in this game.
Yep.
I mean, next up are the whistles, the next component. These are basically like Coal Deluxe, if you will.
Yeah.
You get to move a little further or break some of the rules
Pass
that you
through
would
players
pass
that you
through
can't.
players, go backwards, which you can't otherwise.
Yep. To talk about the actual tiles themselves, because this is very important, there's your basic tiles. You're going to move along train tracks when you use your coal. We'll get into that in a moment. But they each have designated areas in order to gather resources. You only gather the resource when you actually land on the circle, not when you pass through it. There's basic resources, which are your white, brown, and gray. And then you have your really rare resources, which are your red, blue, and green. And you'll be turning these resources in through the course of the game in order to get victory points. To start the game, you're basically going to determine a first player. Everyone's going to start with a particular number of coal, depending upon where you are in that turn order, with the person going last getting the most coal. However, you get to seed the board in reverse turn order, which is fantastic, because you can look at your tiles. There's going to be a random distribution of tiles that players will get, 3, and you can look and kind of determine, what way do I want to move my train? Where do I want to go? What do I want to land on? What do I want to turn in for? So in reverse turn order, players are going to be able to put their trains on any of these starting locations around and around until every player has placed all of their trains, one at a time.
And there's a few things to consider here, because the first thing you're going to look at is those tiles right next to the trains. Yep. Those are the immediate resources that you might be able to pick up. Here we have one that has no resources. And then you're also going to want to look, though, at that middle layer of tiles, because You want to know where the coal yard is, because that's, if you're going to be going through there, you're going to have a very different strategy, because you're going to be able to pick up a bunch of coal, power a bunch of different actions.
Yeah.
Whereas if you don't go through there, you're going to have to find your points and your
movement,
ability, your
yeah.
flexibility a little bit differently. And then finally, you've got that last row of where the goals are. These are going to be, we didn't mention this earlier, these are used and reused by multiple players.
Yeah.
So when I get here to this 25 points for these resources, that doesn't go away.
Yeah.
I can keep my guys going through that and racking up those 25 points as long as I have those resources. So a lot to consider as you're seeding the board.
Yep, so you're going to seed the board, and then you get to actually do your movements. As we said, everyone's going to start with a particular number of coal. However, at the start of every round, you're going to take from the coal stack, and you're going to distribute that evenly. So each player will always get 2 coal at the start of every round. However, you get 4 actions. So 2 coal versus 4 actions,
Right.
You're going to have to manage your resources really, really well. Each player has a player board in front of them. That player board tells them their 4 actions. Anytime you take an action, you take either a whistle and place it on that action, or you take a piece of coal and place it on the action, denoting that you've taken an action for that turn. The actions are very simple. You get to move. If you use a piece of coal, you get to take any one of your trains and move them forward 1 step, following the track. Now, you can't land in the same spot where someone is, and you can't pass through someone unless you use a whistle. So say, for instance, I decided to use my coal, and I decided to move my train here. I simply collect a brown, and it goes into my supply.
Right. You should also note, too, though, that it's not tiles that you're moving.
Yes.
It's spaces on the tiles. And like we noted earlier, there's one of these tiles that doesn't have a resource on it, just has straight track.
Yep.
So you can actually make significant headway, depending on how tiles have been laid out, across the board with one single move.
Yeah, let me give you an example of that. So say I want to move again with my coal. I could place this here, which you'll see is a straight track, which leads to nowhere, which means I have to play another one from my hand and then land on the first available space, which is a blue rare resource.
Right, and all that would take 1 coal.
Yeah, 1 coal. Again, we mentioned whistles. Whistles allow you to pass through. You can either move 1 space forward or 2 spaces forward, but it also has the unique ability of allowing you to move backwards, from 1 space backwards. And that's important because you may want to go to a tile that you've previously been to in order to get a resource and in order to do a special ability. Now, there's a whole bunch of different abilities here that aren't even in play that could be drawn by the characters. There's a whistle factory, which just allows you to grab a whistle. There's trading posts that allow you to trade resources. There's coal yards, which allow you to get extra coal. And then there are these type of things, which are called cities, that allow you to go into these locations, trade the resources, get victory points, and then immediately get a stock of that particular color. There's 5 different stocks. The first person to get a stock gets the number 1 stock, and then the number 2 stock, and so forth. At the end of the game, you're getting points whoever has the most of those stocks. Now, it's important to note, too, anytime you land on any of these scoring tiles, if you don't have the resources, well, you're screwed.
You lose points.
You could possibly lose points from going to that. That's fantastic because it's not just a way to get points, it's a way to kind of funnel people to go to different locations that they don't want to go to.
Well, not only that, when we first sat down to play, I thought, okay, because I'm one of those guys when you see a spot like that and there's negative points if you don't have what you need, you just don't go there.
Yeah.
I can't get that out of my head. In this game, you definitely have to warm up to the idea of like, well, you know what? My route all the way over here is where I really want to get. I'm going to have to go through that. I don't have those resources, or maybe those resources are the same ones I'm going to ultimately want to spend over here.
Yep.
So I'll take the hit.
Yep.
I'll take the negative 2 points there because it's going to get me 25 over here instead of rerouting or changing my plans.
Now, it also needs to be told that some of these tiles, your black tiles, multiple people can sit on those locations. So if I'm here and someone makes their way in this location, there are going to be multiple people in these locations. It's the only places in the game where you can. There's other tiles people could play. On your turn, you could place a gold mine. That allows you to gain a gold. And then there's general stores that allow you to gain any type of resource. Gold is a rare commodity in the game. There's a whole stack of them over here that you see, and on the back sides are point values. They range from 3 to 5, and you're going to be collecting those through the course of the game in order to get in-game victory points. Now, there's one more action you can take on your turn, and these are special tiles that you see here. You're going to play with a number of special tiles equal to the number of players plus 2. These special tiles, you can gather as many as you want on your turn. You have room to hold 3 of them on the bottom of your player board. The great thing is you spend whatever is at the top. If you have those by the end of the game, they give you victory points. However, they also give you abilities throughout the course of the game by spending actions. That's another way to spend your actions or your coal.
These really help you break the rules. Almost all of these revolve around spending a coal to do something special.
Yep.
For instance, if you don't have routes going through the trading post, so you're not doing much trading, there's a tile over there that allows you to spend a coal to do a trade or two. These things kind of break the rules to some degree.
Yeah.
The other really cool thing about these things, they're not always yours.
Yeah.
You might get them. If I have one and Jeremy's like, you know what, you're abusing that, I'll buy it.
Yeah, and it's very simple to buy. You just pay the resources again, but you have to give that player a rare resource of your own. So the resources that you pay just go to the bank, but the rare one has to go to them.
Yeah.
And that can be any rare resource that you have collected. Now, through the course of the game, you're going to be playing 1 through 4 actions. You may not be able to play all 4 actions because you don't have the right amount of coal or you don't have whistles. So you're going to have to manage and say, do I want to take 4 actions next turn and not spend any actions this turn? Do I want to go to a coal mine in order to get them? Do I want to go to trading posts in order to trade in these resources that I've collected? Once you get to the end, you have more options even here. These are bonuses that allow you to get a huge amount of victory points by trading in these resources, or just as these ones, lose victory points if you don't have the right types of resources. You can also look at the number of stocks you have and be able to collect victory points there. However, when you reach any one of these locations, you do the action, and then you get to retire your train onto any one of these spots. There's always 3 different things you can get there. And you can go anywhere you so wish. Say you need a white, a coal, and a whistle, you go to this location, but it blocks players for the rest of the game to going to that specific spot.
Yeah, and there's definitely a tiered aspect to these bonuses. At the top of the board, you've got question marks and some resources. So it gives you the complete flexibility to choose whatever resource you want. And those are probably going to be the ones that go first. But these are huge in setting up another action on the board, because it's easy. In my first game, it's easy to forget, oh, I can finish this, but then I'm going to turn right around and I'll be able to get another blue resource, a coal, and a whistle to
use a different train. Yeah, you're going to keep playing until all the rounds are done. Once that is done, you're going to tally up all the different victory points that you have. There's a wide range of victory points you can get. You can get them from your gold, of course, any of the victory points you've collected through the course of the game, any of your special tiles that you've collected and still hold at the end of the game will give you victory points. You're going to look at all the stocks you have. If you have the most of one of the 5 different types of stocks, you get 15 victory points.
15 is not anything to
No.
sneeze at.
And if they're tied, you're going to look at the first person to get them. So they're numerically ordered 1 through 6. If you have the number 1 and you're tied with someone else, you're going to beat them because you're higher order. You're going to get victory points for your gold. Any of your resources left over, if they're a common resource, they're worth a single victory point. If they're a rare resource, they're worth 3 victory points. Also, any of the tokens, I forgot to mention that. If for every 2 coal and whistles you have, they're worth a victory point as well. Tallied up, whoever has the most wins. I'll say what I don't like about this game first, and it's one thing. It does have some AP in it, some analysis paralysis. There's a lot of things to think about in this game. It's one of those games, again, that gives you a lot of different things, a lot of different options to choose from, and each of them is pretty agonizing on what you want to do and how you want to best use those resources, where you want to maneuver your trains, and how to best manage all the different things you have. That's the only thing I have to say.
Yeah, there's a lot of really delicious decisions to make, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
And I think Jeremy and I agree, it's not a con, more of a warning.
Yeah.
There's AP potential here for sure, depending on who you're playing with. Because, I mean, even just laying some of the tiles down.
Yeah.
You're really having to like place them in there and like kind of figure out where the tile's going to lead to next, because you really have to build those routes carefully. I would say that's the only major thing I would say too is that warning on the AP. One other thing is, this is one of those games, it's going to play well with a competitive group for sure that get used to it and play it more and more.
Yeah.
With that said, get a few games under your belt, because that first game you play, you've got to be careful not to let anyone abuse anything.
Yes.
Because if someone's going on a route up on the north side of the board, and there's some stocks to be had there, and you've got all your guys on the south side of the board with no stocks, you're not going to get the stock points.
Yeah.
So there's 15, maybe 30 more points that someone's going to get. So you better either have a plan to get them elsewhere, or spread out and take that into consideration.
Yeah.
I guarantee you your second game will be different than your first game playing this.
Yeah. There's a lot of, not only those decisions as well, but there can be some blocking in this game is great. There's not a huge amount of player interaction within the game, but there's ways to look at what the player is trying to do. I know one of the games that we played, you were trying to get a very particular stock with a white.
You sat on a white
and
one.
I sat on a white, and I didn't move that train forever because I knew he didn't have any other options other than to use a whistle and go back, but then he'd have to take more movements because he'd already parked all of his trains. There's those type of decisions that make it really, really interesting for players to look around the board and say, he's got 2 stocks, I'm going to get 15 points, but if I can block him out of that, I may get another 15 from this stock I'm holding.
But what's great about that, whereas that would usually turn off a lot of people, in this game, it just turns into another puzzle to solve.
Yeah.
It's not like, well, you're blocking me, I can't do that, I'm done. It's, okay, well, what can I... And then, in that instance, I actually did go backwards and took another route. Ultimately took me to a 25-point spot, whereas had I gone this other way, it would have been a lower scoring spot, but there was one tile that I wanted to get on the way that Jeremy blocked me from.
Yeah.
So it's all about like that interaction creating a new problem to solve.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. That I like a lot.
Yeah. One of the other cool aspects I totally forgot to mention during scoring is that you're going to always have 3 tiles in your hand. You're going to draw back up to 3 at the end of every single one of your rounds. If you draw any of these special tiles, of course, they're going to allow you to place them when you move on to them, which may give you an advantage of knowing that I'm holding this stock, I'm trying to collect the right resources, no one knows I'm going for this stock. But if you don't use it by the end of the game, each one of these special tiles is worth a negative 10 victory points. So they can stifle you as well if you don't plan accordingly.
Yeah, it's interesting, especially the cities with the stocks, because those can be a big advantage. But if you're looking at that and you're seeing 2 resources that you do not have, you don't want to play it, right?
Yeah.
Because
I get it. Yeah.
If you play it, you're going to have to be putting a train on it, and you won't be able to spend those resources.
One of my favorite games of the year. I would be shocked if this wasn't in my top 5. I've already told you, David, this is in my top 3 right now. It's a fantastic game. It's really thinky. A lot of cool aspects going on. Plays well with a variety of different players. It will probably play longer, around the 2-hour mark with 5, just because especially if you play with. I mean, there's quite a bit of AP in here that can be involved with people trying to decide.
A lot of getting tangled up too, I think, in a 4 or 5 player game.
Cool game, guys. Whistle Stop Bezier Games, 2 to 5 player game. If you guys have any questions, make them in the comments below. Subscribe to us, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and everything else that we do here at Man vs. Meeple. And we'll catch you guys next time.
Bye-bye.
Season 1 of Man vs. Meeple is sponsored by our friends at TMG Games. And at Cool Stuff Inc. Cool stuff in stock at coolstuffinc.com.